let's see. Anybody else? Well, I guess we'll get ready to start. So again, welcome. Today we are having another scholarly communications workshop with Emerald, which is a well-known academic publisher. They're a major publisher. They have over 300 journals, and we're hoping that this will give you an insider's view of the publishing process. Now, in order to facilitate that, we have two speakers. Our first speaker is Professor Xu Yan, or his family name is Xu. Professor Xu is currently the Associate Dean of the HKUST Business School, and he oversees the EMBA program with the Executive Education Program and China Strategy. He is a very good reviewer. He received the Excellent Reviewer Award in 2013 from Elsevier, and he also won a Outstanding Paper Award from Emerald just last year. So he'll be our first speaker, and then Mark Murrow will be our second speaker. But when the time comes for him, I'll give him an introduction first. So please, Professor Xu.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. And it's kind of an honor for me to share some of my personal experience. I think I'm a bit different or special because I'm working in the telecom policy and the regulation area. So it's an area that is we need to be very close to the government and also the industry. Because for policy, I cannot just ask a student, fill the questionnaire, or come up with some of the conclusions. I have to communicate with industry and the government. Actually, almost every project come from the project sponsored by either the industry or the government. Just like the one which won the prize of last year. It actually was sponsored by Techmetrics, the first think tank on technology policy in Hong Kong. And I think that is probably a little bit something unusual for me, because I talked to the RDC, the Research and Development Corporation, right? They told me I'm probably the only one professor from business school keeps signing the contract with industry and also the government. Actually, I'm not trying to make money, because if you look at the amount of money, it's actually very low. University take 30% away, nothing left for me. But the good thing is I can hear the voice of the industry and also the government. Every year I take the EMBA student to Stanford. And in Stanford, they have a kind of industry visiting scholarship. I'm a little bit curious. I said, you are the world-class university. Why are you so close to industry? They said, no, we need to listen to the voice of the industry. By inviting them working with us, we know what's the concern of the industry. They will provide very, the right topic for us to do the research. And in some time, you actually can access to, the company, get a lot of data. I think that I actually agree with that, because if I don't have a project, I just simply get some idea and want to collect some data by doing the interview to the companies. Normally, you won't get that much data. They just give you, this is our annual report, but I can get that easily from their website. But if they commit the project to you, let us share everything to you. I remember in the year of 2004, I get a project sponsored by the Audit Commission of Hong Kong government, because I want to see if the Office of Telecom Authority is doing a good job or not. I said, wow, yeah, this is a good project. And also the OFTA, Office of Telecom Authority, take it very seriously, because if the conclusion is very negative, the life will be hard, for the director and also for the whole office. So, and when we talk to the company, because we tell them we are working on this project, well, all the company try to share everything with you. Some are very confidential. Before I do this project, I also teach the telecom policy. One of the modules is network interconnection. But to be honest, I read lots of books. I just basically understand the principle of interconnection. I don't know, in reality, how difficult it is. But when I visited the WOF TNT, New World Telecom, even the PCCW, or they just take me, walk around all the offices where the interconnection is happening, where they share every data, how difficult to negotiate with, PCs level or Hong Kong Telecom in that time. So this data is really useful. Firstly, they make my teaching very, very interesting and exciting. I no longer just share with them the models and the theories. Actually, I have the real case. I can show them the real pictures. So that module turned out to be the most popular module in my lectures. I have 14 modules. That one was the most popular because I get a lot of first-hand information. Secondly, when you look at the publications, most of the scholars probably don't have such a kind of experience. But I do. Where I published a paper in the telecom policy a few years ago, I think in the year 2006. And was getting very popular because people said, wow, we never what's happening behind this kind of regulatory document. In reality, many, many interesting cases. So I think by working together with industry and the government is really helpful for publications, at least for my case, because I work on policy and regulations. And I think that's a very important, how to get started. For me, I always start from one of the projects, sponsored by the industry or the government. Secondly, I think attending international conference is a very, very important academic conference. When you go there, you can learn what's the most hot topic. And especially for telecom policy, it's a country specific. If Americans talk to something in the US, I can always ask, is that relevant to Hong Kong or China or not? If it's relevant and nobody publishes it, then you can start from there. So I think academic conference is really, really useful, to find, from there you can start. Another is literature review, definitely, journals, definitely we should read. And also for my case, I also pay attention to the news. So in the library, we have this Vice News, right? So every day I search the portion about telecoms because my area is telecommunications. Because I graduated from Beijing University of Post and Telecom in the year 1984. So starting from there, I position myself as a telecom person. I think that is also very important. Find the right position and keeps follow that path. So I probably am not an expert in innovation, but I can say I can publish innovation in the telecoms. I'm not expert in accounting, but I do a project for the telecom, for the Ministry of Post and Telecom on the accounting system. So I think that once you have a the main line or main path, that it can be very helpful. There you can do whatever as long as it's relevant to telecoms. Another is how to target your work more effectively. For myself, because I work on telecom, I normally focus on 3 leading journals in my area. That is telecommunication policy of the elsewhere, and also Info, also published by the Moreau. Actually, the editor of Info is a former editor of telecommunication policy, so he's a very, very sharp person. And that journal is also getting very popular in our area. But the problem is, some of the journal may be not recognized by my department or school. But for me, I say, by the end, you can always argue, you hire me as a telecom person, so there's nothing wrong, to keep publishing in telecom-related journals. So when the case of tenure comes, I write the kind of dossier, and actually the committee are very favorable to me. Say, well, yes, you are the telecom person. You publish in all the top journals in telecom, and in the same time, you work very closely to the telecom industry and also the government, contribute a lot to the communities. Like the one we did for the audit commission. To some extent, we make the liberalization of telecom market much faster than before, because we do point out several issues the regulator should take care of, and in the end, all the Hong Kong citizens benefit from this kind of telecom market liberalization. So in the end, they give me approval to get my tenure. Right. So I think as long as you do well, specifically in your area, I think in the end, you get recognition from the department, from the school, and also from university. So there's some other issue. How long I have talked already? Almost.
You still have about 5 minutes.
Oh, still 5 minutes. Okay. Right. So I think probably I highlight a lot of my thinking already. So I just wonder, do you have any questions that I probably can answer?
I have a question. If I was a new researcher, and it seems that you positioned yourself early as a telecoms person.
Yes.
So how, let's say somebody is not quite so sure of where they are, how can they, by maybe looking at, as you said, certain journals or looking at news, how can they kind of find their place, their area? And do you have any advice for that?
I think like our department, you can see once we talk about this faculty or that faculty, immediately you can count, oh, he's the expert in the social media, and he's the expert in the workflow management. And why is that? Because it keeps publishing in the similar areas, and gradually you will build up a reputation. I think it's important for you, for yourself, to identify which area you are interested, and which area you have a strength. And if you keep working on it, at the end, you will turn out to be expert in that specific area.
Okay, well, thank you. Does anyone else have some questions or comments about perhaps their own experiences?
We have been talking a lot about collecting research data. It seems that your projects always involve data.
That's right.
Do you think it's possible to make some of them available to the public so that others can also benefit?
So for my data is actually, it's mainly about policy. The data is based on interview or this kind of things. It's not kind of data, operation data or this kind of things. Yeah. So my data is normally can come out from my publications. If you look at my paper, as according to the interview with the CEO, on some day, I can do it. And when I share about me the procedure of interconnections, I also write them. And actually, I draw a diagram and publish it in my papers. Of course, I get the approval from the operator first. Can I publish it? They say yes, yes. Then I can publish. Yeah. So actually, my data is not that kind of quantitative data. It's mainly based on the interview, this kind of things. So
interviews can also be archived or provided as supplementary information.
Yes. So I think for all the data, as long as I ask that question, I think it's relevant to my research. Normally, once I agree, I always can publish in my journal. So the data actually always come out from my publications. I don't have much, hiding my my PCs. But at the same time, I know a lot of professors in my department that are working on the big data, these kind of things. So they need huge data. And sometimes when they get the data from Tencent or something, normally they need to get approval to share it or not. But the good thing is I recently met several scholars in HKUST that are very willing to share the data and collect it. Like James Shi, working in the social media laboratories. He somehow he gets a lot of data because he worked together with a professor in Cambridge and also the MIT. So they all collected a lot of data, and actually they probably have no time to digest all the data. They're willing to share. So I think that's a very good attitude. Yeah. But I'm not sure they share that in the university database, or you just talk to them, they pass some of the data to you. So university, we have a database, right? Do we have that one?
As the repository, and we're thinking of building one specifically for data.
Yeah, I think that'd be very useful for some of the scholars.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you very much, Professor Xu. We'll have another Q&A session, so if different questions or comments occur to you, please, you can feel free. So now we're getting ready to welcome Mr. Mark Murrow. Mark has worked within the publishing division at Emerald for over 5 years. During this time, he has held the position of development editor and publisher. He's managed book series and many different ISI-ranked journals within Emerald's portfolios. So he originally studied at the University of Leeds, and this is his first visit to Hong Kong. So please welcome Mr. Mark Murrow. Oh. Here we go.
Thank you very much, everyone. Like I say, my name is Mark Murrow. I'm from Emerald Group Publishing in the United Kingdom. It's a great pleasure to be here today. Such a beautiful campus. I'm surprised you ever get anything done. So I'm just going to give you a combination of a strategic overview of the publishing industry and also some of the more traditional aspects of the mechanics of getting published in research journals and also books. The reason why there's a combination of that kind of high-level strategy and more day-to-day kind of tactical aspect is because, as we'll see in a moment, the publishing industry is an incredibly complex industry. There are over 120,000 journals in existence today. So you really do need to be strategic about where you're going to get published and how you're going to get published. So just to give you an overview of Emerald Group Publishing, we were founded in 1967 in West Yorkshire, the United Kingdom. We were founded by academics, for academics, so Emerald was established by Dr. Keith Howard, who at the time was the head of the doctoral research training program at the University of Bradford. He remains the chairman of Emerald to this day. At the moment, we have over 310 employees, and we publish more than 300 journals and 230 book series. All of our book series are actually an acquisition which we made from Elsevier in 2007. In 2013, over 21 million articles were downloaded, which is over 50,000 a day. And at the moment, we have offices in Australia, China, Dubai, South Africa, Japan, India. My colleague Stanley at the front is from our office in Taipei. And we also have quite a large publishing representation in the United States. I mentioned earlier on that Emerald was established by Dr. Keith Howard. This is Dr. Howard on the right, receiving his OBE from the Queen last year, particularly for the services to the publishing industry by the establishment of Emerald. He remains the chairman of the Emerald Global Publishing Group to this day, which is actually the parent company which owns Emerald and several other businesses. So just a little about me. I originally studied for a bachelor's in philosophy at the University of Liverpool, a master's degree in the history and philosophy of science from the University of Leeds. Over the past 4 years, I've been a publisher of entrepreneurship, business ethics, operations management, logistics, marketing, Chinese and Indian management research, and also education, so quite a diverse portfolio with quite a diverse range of experience. I've worked with international organisations such as the Institute for Small Business and Entrepreneurship. I was actually elected to the board of that organisation when I was 23, 24. I've also worked with the Academy of Business and Society, which is based in Geneva in Switzerland, and also the World Association for Lesson Studies, which is based in Singapore. I've included a little image there of Liverpool Football Club, one of the most important aspects of my life. And raise your hand if there are any Liverpool fans in the room. Okay, so obviously where I'm from in Liverpool, very close connections with Hong Kong, two maritime cities, lots of trade links, lots of cultural links. So Emerald is primarily known as a social sciences publisher of business and management. And this is just a quick overview of some of the areas which we publish. And I'm sure that this will more than cover your faculty expertise at HKUST and also the areas which you would like to publish in. So our most established portfolio is actually marketing, and we have the highest representation of ISI in operations, logistics, and quality, which is a very high-profile collection for Emerald. We've also branched out into public policy, environmental management, and also information science, which is a new collection which will come in the next few years. We've also branched out into the social, the physical and the health sciences. So we have quite a large collection of ISI ranked journals in engineering. And I've actually just come to move to education, which is a portfolio Emerald continues to invest in and to grow. Just like to emphasise several of our journals, which are genuinely world class. So the International Journal of Sustainability in Higher Education is actually in the top quartile of every education journal published in existence. So out of 8,000 journals, this journal is in the top, very top. Supply Chain Management is our highest ranked ISI impact factor journal. It's a journal which I've managed in the past as well. The European Journal of Marketing is one of our oldest journals. It publishes over 70 to 80 papers a year, all ISI ranked. And the China Agricultural and Economic Review is a relatively new publication to Emerald, which was accepted within the very first year of publication into ISI again. So I keep mentioning ISI, and it's something I keep referring to. Could I have a show of hands? How many people are familiar with that term? There's something a few people. It's just because I have a few slides on the importance of ISI when developing your publication strategy. It's safe to say that it is a predominant factor in deciding where you should choose to publish. So I'm happy to take questions throughout. As I said at the beginning, there's a mixture between strategy and tactics. So if there's anything you'd like me to clarify at any stage, please just raise your hand. So more on the tactical side of things, the more traditional kind of editorial process, because I appreciate for many first-time authors, it's a bit of an opaque industry, and it may not be immediately obvious where you begin and the importance of several things which happen throughout that process. Dr. Howard established Emerald to serve the academic community. In 1967, he felt at the time that there actually weren't enough business and management publications in existence. So he left his position as the head of the doctoral program at the University of Bradford to establish Emerald to serve those needs. So it all begins with the author. It all begins with the researcher who produces high quality research papers. They then need to find a place to publish, which is where the independent academic editor comes into the process and why their position is so important. For Emerald, all of our editors are independent. They're not employees of Emerald. They don't work for a salary or a fee. They receive an editorial honoraria, which is quite generous, for their services rendered to the community. The Emerald editor, the academic editor, works with several advisory board members, which are also independent. They do this pro bono as a service to their community. That ensures the integrity and the quality of the research, and there's no other factor which can influence their judgments other than having the best possible research published in the journal which they serve. The editor and the EAB, in combination, administer a review process. You'll hear several different types of review: single blind, double blind, and open. Every single one of Emerald's journals uses double blind peer review, which means that the author and the reviewer are anonymous to each other, and only the editor knows the identity of both. Again, that's to ensure equality and transparency. A study undertaken by another publisher several years ago revealed that when double-blind peer review was lifted from a journal just temporarily, on average, less female authors were published in that journal. So that's important why the age, the gender, the race, the ethnicity, the location of the authors is anonymous. Professor Xu mentioned conferences have been so vitally important. All Emerald editors actually receive a stipend to attend international conferences to ensure that the journal and the research that they publish is genuinely hot topic and is discussed globally. It also ensures that all of our journals publish the new areas of coverage, and it's filling the needs and kind of satisfying the requirements of the community. So my role as a publisher, rather than Emerald as the publishing house, is to act between the link between the independent academic editor and Emerald as the entity, the publishing company. So I support the editors who I work with to build first-class journals internationally. I travel globally. This is my very first time in Hong Kong. I was in Taiwan last week. I'll be in Indonesia the week after. We also work to market and promote the journal, raise the profile of all our authors. Professor Xu is a member of the Literati Network. He received an award, and that's something that we do every year. For every one of our journals, we select the best reviewer and most outstanding paper. I also act as the liaison with our production department. And the production department undertake more traditional publishing roles are proofreading, preparation for online publication, print and digital distribution. There was a question earlier on about data sets. It's our production department actually, I'm pleased to say, in the next few years, publishers such as Emerald will move towards the publication of data, because we appreciate that the end product of a research paper is just a small piece of a much wider project. And it's via that process that we make the research available to end users, libraries such as this, in print and digital, and also to third parties such as Google. And I'd like to emphasize that publishing is an incredibly digital and technological business. So several years ago it was mainly print formats, but we have undertaken several huge rounds of investment to move towards a digital kind of technological enterprise. And via that investment back into the value chain, that we make the research available back to you so that you can begin the process again. Are there any specific areas along this chain which you're particularly unclear about, or you'd like me to emphasize? We can always take questions towards the end. I'll just move through. As I mentioned, I act as a liaison between the academic editor and the Emerald as the publishing company. But I also work with several internal colleagues, such as the managing editor, who is more day-to-day contact with the academic editor to make sure everything progresses smoothly, administers the peer review process, resolves author queries, and also my colleague Stephanie, who acts as an editorial assistant in preparation of marketing materials, distribution of awards. This kind of division aligns quite nicely with the external editorial team, who works with an editor-in-chief, a managing editor, an advisory board, and a review board. And it's an incredibly relationship-orientated process. As I say, none of our editors are employees, so it's only fair that we take the time to listen to their needs and give back. So the editorial decision-making process is quite simple but quite complicated at the same time. So when an author submits a paper, it moves to the editor, who makes an editorial selection as to whether what we refer to as a desk decision. So literally in the old days, the paper would come across the editor's desk and they'd make a decision as to whether they'd like to immediately reject or send it out to review. That's a very important process because the editor acts as a gatekeeper. Because all of the reviewers for the journals do this as a pro bono service to the community, and everyone's very time poor nowadays. So alongside every other myriad commitment they have, they also review academic papers. All being well, the paper is assigned to a reviewer who undertakes a double-blind process, makes several comments and suggestions back to the author, which comes back to you once your paper has been submitted. And it's at that point you either decide you would like to take on board the comments and you make those suggestions, or actually you go back to the reviewer and say, thank you very much for your time, obviously, but I think that I'm not going to take these comments on board. And it's a point to emphasize that if you've never been published in an academic journal before, when you receive these comments back, it often feels like you have to take on board every single suggestion that's being made. But you need to remember that the reviewer is only trying to help you suggest and improve the paper, and they're more than open to criticism themselves. There's very strong reviewers like Professor Xu have also been through this process. So quite recently my wife was completing her dissertation for her degree, and she was so upset and so tired because her supervisor had spent several months basically coming backwards and forwards with comments and reviews and suggesting do this and do this and do this. And she was in tears one night, and I said to her, well, that's a good sign because he has seen some merit in the work which you're trying to complete. So several months later, when she got the highest possible grade, she could see the merit of that process. And actually, if you've got very few comments and a straight reject, that's often not a very good sign. So that cycle can either happen once if it's an absolutely top stellar paper, but more often than not, it'll be 1, 2, or 3 times, whereby the paper goes out to review, comments are made, and it comes back to the author. It tends to differ from discipline to discipline. In the social sciences, you'll go through that process more often than not, for example, in business and management, once or twice. Where in engineering or economics, it may be 7, 8, 9 times, depending on the field. Also a point, if there are any economists in the room, you can expect to take anywhere up to a year to go through this process, because often professors of economics like to see the data set and like to see how things roll out within the wider economy. because there's obviously quite a scandal recently when a paper was published based on data which relates to the financial crisis, and there was an error in the data, and actually the findings were completely unrelated. So all being well, once those revisions have come through and the editor's made a decision that there's no further work to be done, the preparation comes to the publisher. So it's just to emphasise that this entire process is handled externally of the publishing company, and it's handled by academics, for academics. If you're publishing more in the physical and the hard sciences, you may often find that this process is handled internally at the publisher. For example, if you publish with Nature Journal based in London, some of that process will be handled internally, and that's just because some of the research that's being published is very clinical. So the safety and checks and balances need to be implemented, and nothing can be left to chance.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Go back to that.
Yeah, sure.
Diagram. Can you talk more about the prepared camera-ready manuscript?
Oh, sorry, that's a typo. I should just say prepare the manuscript. I'm not sure why it says camera there. Sorry.
Okay.
So that's just preparation, making sure things like copyright permissions are cleared, which I have a later slide on that. It's very important. Professors, you mentioned having the necessary clearance from companies, especially when you do case studies and interviews. So it's making sure that before that comes to the publisher, those permissions are cleared. So we had an example recently where somebody had gone into a bank to conduct some research, and it was on the financial crisis and staff morale. So the head of human resources made several comments about staff morale within the company, but the author never notified them that that was actually going to lead to a manuscript published later on. So when it came to this stage, when the author was preparing it, before they sent it to the publisher, the query went back. He said, oh, no, I didn't check, I'll just go and check now. And of course, the head of human resources did not want to be quoted in that paper, but without those quotations, the paper lost so much of its value. So I have several slides on that. Yeah.
So that version will be after the peer review process, and then have some revision on that manuscript already.
Yes, because
it's not the original manuscript.
Yes, so that's the original manuscript ready for production. So it's something we refer to in publishing as the version of record. So it's the version of record that is going to appear in print, and that's vitally important for things such as authorship disputes. It's also at that stage that Emerald's policy allows for depositing in the institutional repository, because ultimately it's your work. So it's only at that stage that you have the service of the review, and you have the service of improving the paper, and then you can deposit in your institutional library, and it's that version of record why that's so important. So keeping in mind that a lot of the service is undertaken for free and a service to the community, you do have to be mindful of some of the time considerations. So the editor makes an initial decision, which can take ideally about 1 week. The contacting of reviewers, obviously everyone's very busy nowadays, so that can take another week. We give our reviewers 6 to 8 weeks to complete their reviews. We use an electronic submission system which sends out reminders to make sure that the reviewers are not pressured too much, but also the author gets a good service. And it's for that reason actually that we give out these awards, and we give out literary awards, reviewer awards, to acknowledge the work which people have undertaken. So the editor then assesses the reviewer comments and makes recommendations and decisions. That can take another 2 weeks. And the ideal time which we strive for in all of our journals is a time frame from 3 to 3.5 months from the initial decision, review, and then the initial decision. So obviously it can take longer the more the paper has to go through that process. This is an example using a base rate of around 86 papers from a Emerald journal several years ago. To begin with 100% of submissions, and so you can see that only 29% were eventually ever published within that publication over a 12-month period. So that also gives you the kind of scale of the checks and balances which need to be implemented. So you may often hear journals say that we have a high quality publication because we reject 95% of everything that's submitted. So that is not in itself an indicator of quality, but also it does give you the sense that only the very top papers get published in these journals. So the 4 journals which I referred to earlier from Emerald, so Sustainability in Higher Education, European Journal Marketing, Supply Chain Management, and Chinese Agricultural and Economic Review, all have rejection rates of anywhere from 70 to 90%. So it's very difficult. But I wouldn't let that can be misleading sometimes, because it's not in itself an indicator of quality. Because if a journal is very specific and focused on a very specific topic, everything which is submitted might be commissioned and hand-picked by the editor. But to refer to this point, you can see that every stage rejections are made, even after initial stages of revision. So just because you've been through the process once of first review, that still doesn't guarantee publication, because the editor then may actually decide, even after amendment, just doesn't quite meet the bar of that specific journal. But what's disappointing from a publisher's point of view is that you can see there that 10% of papers and 6% of papers were withdrawn by the authors even after review once and then twice. So those withdrawals, nobody ever informed the author that they need to stop. They maybe took it too personally, took it to heart, just thought, I can't continue with this, it's damaging my morale so much. Whereas the example I gave earlier of my wife writing her dissertation, if she'd have given up, she would never have got that end result. So it's important that once you begin the process, that you stick with it and see it through to the end, whether good or bad, because even if a paper is rejected, I can guarantee that that research in itself will be vastly improved, just because of the kind of knowledge exchange and sharing process which goes through in the review process. So the possible decisions once you've made a submission are immediate accept. I can guarantee that's not going to happen very often, but we have seen it. Immediate reject, which for first-time authors is, I'm afraid to say, far more common. But more often than not, it'll be either a minor or a major revision. And as I said, a request for revision is good news, because that's the heart and soul. That's the heart and soul not only of academia, but also the dialectical process and the scholarly process as well. We have a paradox in what we refer to in the publishing industry called the Einstein paradox. So you have to keep in mind that if Einstein was writing today, he'd be rejected. Because some of the things he was writing about were so new, he would never get accepted straight away. I mentioned earlier on that there are several types of peer review, but in the social sciences, particularly business, management, operations, engineering, you'll see double-blind review. Open review is only often used when a paper is hand-commissioned and you've been especially invited to write for that paper. So the editor themselves will undertake the review process. They may refer to colleagues, but obviously it's for efficiency. You don't always have to undertake that review. Single-blind review you may come across in disciplines more related to the physical sciences, or the hard sciences, because you can often tell from the references in the body of the paper who the author is. So again, for efficiency and for speed, some journals use single-blind review. If a paper has only been single-blind reviewed or desk editor reviewed, all the Emerald papers will say clearly on the bottom of the paper. But if it doesn't say anything, it's double-blind review. Mentioned earlier on, the reason why we use peer review is to ensure integrity, transparency, equality, fairness, and most important, quality. Because it's a very time-intensive process, but we stick to it because we genuinely believe that it improves the quality of everything which we publish. Again, I mentioned earlier on about, you had a question about preparing the final version of the manuscript before you deliver it to the publisher, and that is related to copyright. So copyright, not only things which you have reproduced in your works, but also permissions for things such as case studies and interviews. So once the paper is published by the author, once the paper is published by the publisher, and it has that stamp of the Emerald brand, actually we become responsible for any resultant libel lawsuits or cases which arise. So that's why it's very important that everything is clear beforehand.
I have a question.
Yes, sure.
What about some things that are listed as public domain, say from Wikimedia or Creative Commons material?
That's a very good question. And increasingly nowadays, I suspect in Wikipedia and the Creative Commons.
Yes.
The first thing I would say is, if you're not sure where to start, to check with your library. I think actually your library can offer a very good starting point to make advice later on. You can also contact the publisher. So Emerald has a designated email address on our rights and permission page, permissions@emeraldinsight.com. We have a team of people who can make recommendations to you. On things such as Wikipedia, there's actually a copyright disclaimer on the bottom of the page, which tells you what you can and can't use it for, and also different types of reproduction licenses. So CC BY-N, CC NYC.
Because somebody once told me when I was recommending that they could try to find an image that is, say, Creative Commons available from Flickr for a particular image or something he wanted. He said, oh, my publisher told me I can't use Creative Commons, they won't let me. So I was wondering, does Emerald have a policy one way or the other, or does it deal case by case?
I think we would deal on a case-by-case basis because it depends on the type of license which is being used for that particular image. Yeah. So if you just give a carte blanche, no, you can't use any reproduction, that's not advisable. It does depend, and it depends what you're going to use the image for as well. So when the person who took, for example, a photograph of McDonald's, they may have gone and got permission, got the necessary licenses, but only for that image, not for it to then be reproduced at a later stage. So I say I'd always check with your library staff and faculty, they can give you very good advice there. Contact the publisher, they will have a general email address. And also I think the Creative Commons website as well, which we can circulate after the session. It will tell you the different types of licenses which you can and can't use for that. And just to emphasize, if permission cannot be cleared for something, we cannot publish it. So even if it's a 15-page article with a very small image, and you don't have permission for that image, it can't be published. It's absolutely fine if you've written for a paper and you receive reviewer comments back, which is reject, and then you spend several months improving the paper and resubmitting it back to the journal. It's not advisable because if the editor made the decision it's not ideal for that journal, it's unlikely to be published, but you can do that. But what you must never do under any circumstances is submit the same article to more than one journal at the same time. It's highly unethical because, as I referred to earlier on, researchers themselves have given up their time to perform this review process. And a professor can be a reviewer for Journal A by Elsevier, Journal B by Emerald, Journal C by Taylor and Francis. So if they receive the same paper and they're colleagues and networks of each other, it's not going to improve your chances. It can be highly detrimental. What we often see as well, unfortunately, is a lot of first-time authors count on referees to give tutoring on a paper. So they'll develop a publication strategy where they will send their paper to a C-ranked journal, get some good comments and reviews, withdraw it, and then resubmit it to an A-ranked journal to get published later on at a later stage. Again, that's highly unethical. But you also have to keep in mind that academics review for several journals, and you can actually be the reviewer of Journal C, but the editor of Journal A. So Professor Xu mentioned that the editor of the Emerald Journal for Info, previously the editor of the Elsevier Journal. He would almost likely as well be a reviewer for Info when he was the editor of Elsevier Journal, and it maybe change those roles around as well. It's also important that you seek agreement between authors and make sure that everyone in the research team knows about the article. So appreciate when you're undertaking a research project, you may have several outputs, and just one of those outputs is a research paper. The other one may be a data set or a case study. So it's important that if you are the author who's leading the research article output, that everybody on that team knows that the paper is going to arise from this. And also that you clarify the author listing as well. So the first named author may be different to the corresponding author. And actually for one research paper outlet, author A may want to go first and then second, and to make that sure, because for tenure and grants, it matters very much. Often some research outputs don't count towards a research grant unless you're the first named author of that paper and the second or the third named author of that paper, so it's important that that's clarified very early on before anything is submitted. So Emerald is a long-standing supporter of the Committee on Publication Ethics, which is an independent entity supported by all of the major publishers, such as Elsevier, Wiley, Emerald, Taylor and Francis. And if any dispute ever arose between a publisher or an author, or between authors and editors, we would always refer back to this website, which gives open, you can access it today if you wanted to, and it would show the decision-making process which the publisher would employ to ensure a fair resolution for all parties. So this covers everything from plagiarism to copyright to authorship disputes to peer review queries, questions about the integrity, whether the anonymity of a reviewer is being compromised during the review process. So sometimes a reviewer receives a paper, contacts the author and says, hey, I just received your paper, and there's that's compromised the entire process. I mentioned earlier on that if you publish with Emerald as well, you do become part of this literati network which we have, which is what we like to view as a huge expert network of everyone who publishes with Emerald. We give you a complimentary journal issue upon publication, make available several kind of insider subscription lists to make you available of new initiatives which we're undertaking. We offer editing services and make you aware of the Outstanding Doctoral Research Awards, which prizes we award every year with a cash prize to outstanding researchers in every area which we publish, whether they publish with Emerald or not. We also give out the Literati Network Awards for excellence. That's the outstanding editors, reviewers, authors, and papers. I'm now going to move into a more strategic section of the presentation. So appreciate that this may kind of move up into the clouds a bit more. But as I say, the publishing industry has changed so predominantly from a print-based model to a technological model. So if there are any questions, or we can take them towards the end, and we'll move on. Although it's an incredibly technological industry, the nuts and bolts of the publishing landscape remain very common from 1665, when the first academic journal was founded in London, the Transactions of the Royal Philosophical Society in 1665. So that journal actually still exists to this day, Part A and Part B, biological and the hard and physical sciences. At the time, the secretary of the Royal Philosophical Society realised that when people came to London from all over Germany and Italy and France to give these presentations, no one was actually keeping a record of the conversations which were taking place. So he set up the journal out of his own funds to capture that conversation. I think that's a useful metaphor to keep in mind when you're developing a publication strategy, that journals exist to capture a conversation between scholars across the globe. So Professor Xu mentioned keeping abreast of new developments, new ideas, practical implications. And even though it's 120,000 journals, there's 120,000 different conversations taking place. You need to make sure that you've got something to say to that conversation. And you don't want to barge into the conversation shouting, and you don't want to be too timid either. You want to position yourself correctly, say the correct things, and be aware of what other people are discussing. So a really important factor in modern journal publishing is Thomson Reuters ISI. So it's founded on what's known as the Bradford Principle, which is a statistical technique hit upon by Dr. Eugene Garfield in the United States in the early 60s, late 70s. And he found that of all the journals in existence, he could make a recommendation to a librarian that the top only 10% of all of those journals actually contributed to the citation activity. So a scholar or researcher could more often than not refer to those top 10% of journals and have the very best research available to them. It's not without its flaws, which I'll mention in a minute. But to say that in 2015, of 320 journals which Emerald publishes, 58 of our journals will be included in that top 10% of 120,000. It's very transparent actually, and there's a free essay available on the Thomson Reuters website called the Journal Selection Process. And they say that many factors are taken into account whether to include the journal in ISI, such as the qualitative and quantitative methodologies, standards, editorial content, authorship, but most importantly citation data. I recommend actually that when you're targeting journals and you're drawing up a wish list of publication outlets, you read that essay first just as a general overview, so that when you hear things like impact factors in ISI and rankings, you can take some things with a pinch of salt. And you know, for example, that in some disciplines it's much easier to get cited than others, so therefore impact factors will be higher. So the impact factor is derived from the number of times that all items published in that journal were cited by journals already in ISI, divided by the amount of citable items, which are mainly research papers and review articles, published in the 2 preceding years. Divided gives you the 2013 impact factor, for example, which is released this year. Next year we'll get the 2014 impact factor. So it's a very long window, and it's primarily a measure of citation activity within a volume level. It says nothing about the authors, but in the individual papers or even the issue. So you can see that it is a relatively straightforward measure. So that can lead to actually quite a few papers in the journal getting published that were never cited at all, and then quite a few papers that were cited quite a lot. So high impact factors doesn't always necessarily lead to consistent quality. And if you're working in a research discipline such as engineering, science, physical sciences, you get cited very easily because that's the general culture of that discipline. My own discipline in philosophy, nobody ever gets cited. They just Plato, Socrates, and Sun Tzu, and that's about it. So impact factors are actually not a very good representation of my discipline. This is an infographic which Thomson Reuters has actually produced, and it's the world scale by the number of documents published in journals included in ISI. So you can see it was established in the United States, Thomson Reuters, as a database. So it favours American methodologies and American approaches. Because to get into ISI, you have to be cited by journals already in ISI. So when it begins with a lot of American journals, and that's how it spreads. So it does warp the research landscape. And Thomson Reuters, in fairness to them, are more than aware of this. So just last year, they announced a partnership with Google Scholar. So it kind of broadens the citation potential, and Thomson Reuters are working to kind of take that bias out of their algorithm. But it is still something that you need to be mindful of at this stage. An alternative to Web of Science ISI is Scopus, which again is another database. So these things aren't infallible measures of quality, they're databases, so they're products. Scopus was founded by Elsevier, and of all of our journals, we actually have 235 journals included in Scopus. So Scopus has the same high standards of high standards of quality before a journal is included, but they don't necessarily give any more weighting to citation than they do for editorial standards, speed of publication, and quality of research. So again, you can see that their categories for inclusion are good peer review, diversity of authorship, content, readability of articles, standing, regularity, and online access. They use two measures, what we call bibliometric indicators. The SNP, which takes into account it's easier to get cited in some disciplines than it is in others, so it means it's source normalized. And they also use the Scimago journal rank, which takes into account that one citation from the Lancet is far better than one citation from a very new journal that hasn't yet established its reputation. So of 120,000 journals in existence, how do you make sure that your individual article stands out? And that's something that the publishing industry refers to as the article economy. So nowadays, when people access Google Scholar, it's often the primary route for finding research. People search on the individual article level. From an author's point of view, the journal brand is paramount. From the end user's point of view, it's the individual article that matters. So the individual titles are increasingly seen as a brand, which ensures high quality into this article economy. And the impact factor was developed in the pre-digital area, in the print area. So the impact factor is a measure of that brand, but it says nothing about the articles at the other end. There is, however, a method of ranking the quality, the breadth and depth of a researcher by something called the H-index. The H-index was established by a physicist at the University of California, J.E. Hirsch. As I say, I proposed the index H defined as the number of papers with citation number or equal to H. So if you have a H-index of 5, you have 5 papers each cited at least 5 times. So that is that's an indicator more of the individual researcher rather than necessarily where they've published. You can calculate a H-index using a whole variety of databases. I was going to say, sorry, hands up if you know your H-index. It's something, I probably know all your H-indexes, but you may not know your individual one. It's still not 100% perfect though, because I said earlier on, the Einstein paradox would have a H-index of 1. Einstein already had one paper cited millions of times, but it was just one paper, so it's still 1. So it's an indicator of breadth and depth. You can calculate your H-index yourself, and it's something I would recommend actually that you keep track of and keep monitoring. I think your library can help with this as well, by CV building and tutoring. This is a very hastily drawn diagram because I couldn't actually find something that exactly portrayed what I was trying to get at. But if you just imagine this outer square as all the scholarly research in existence, this inner circle here, like a quick Venn diagram, captures articles in Web of Science. So they include 5 to 10% of all the research. As the circle gets larger, it gets more inclusive. So this second inner circle, that's Scopus, will include 40 to 60% of all documents. And then the largest possible circle will be something like Google Scholar, which captures 90%. So Google actually covers what we refer to in the publishing industry as the grey literature. It's like conference papers, proceedings, presentations, data sets. So they're still important to the researchers and to the research community, but they don't actually at this moment have a home within a journal publication. So I say when you use these different databases to arrive at these figures and metrics and indicators of quality, just kind of keep that in mind, and also that they're not an exact match. So something can be in ISI but not in Scopus. Something can be in Scopus but not in ISI, something can be in both, something in neither. And depending on where it's included, you'll get vastly different results. There's a free website, again, which I recommend you check out, called journalmetrics.com. And this is a very geeky website for bibliometrics and people like me who like this thing. And it tells you different metrics depending on which features that you wish to study. So again, it's a free tool which you can use. It visualizes science. It shows you overviews of geographical output. You can see the multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary relations. So you can see the business and management up here, how it relates more to psychological research. On the other side, more engineering. What's directly opposed to is kind of physical, biological research. What you can't see on the screen, but what you can do is, as well, is really zoom in and see individual journals as they relate to each other. So there's a question earlier on about how you specialize yourself as a researcher and how you position yourself within that trajectory. Something like this can help, and it can also show you related areas of actually people working in very similar disciplines may also be interested in your work. It's based on Scopus, so it gives you a very open overview. You're using 60 to 70% of journals. And this is just a snapshot of Hong Kong. So you can see the huge growth in research from Hong Kong, the citations, its representation regionally, and also across the world. So again, I wouldn't spend hours and hours and hours and hours interpreting and interrogating the data. But when you begin that trajectory, when you begin that path of developing publications, just keep these kind of things in mind because it's all freely available. And based on that data, you can also see things such as outputs of Hong Kong, disciplines which are growing, disciplines that may be receding, how these taxonomies are changing, things like internet research merges into information science, how things like operations management is more closely aligned to logistics, supply chain, how entrepreneurship splits out from business into a more distinct category rather than kind of becoming business generally. So in the article economy, with 120,000 journals publishing each year, each journal publishing about 4 issues, each issue of about 10 papers, prize for anyone who can tell me what the end result is. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of papers published each year. So within that article economy, you need to position yourself using all of these different tools which are available to show your quality as a researcher. Your librarian can actually pull those information together to aggregate of the score of the individual university, and also the universities which you collaborate with, and how you position yourself globally within this economy. So usage is something a publisher can provide. Citations, using things such as the impact factor and citations, and what we call alternative metrics, which is Twitter, Facebook, Mendeley, institutional repository archives, links, things like archive for mathematicians. So they all show impact just in a way outside of citations and downloads. There's a question mark there. I'm just going to move on to an earlier slide there, just to say that there are some national and regional considerations which you need to take into account. For example, in France, there's something called the CMRS. But for a French researcher, they have to publish in journals listed by this index, which is established by the French government. So I don't know whether you have very similar things in Hong Kong, but it is something you need to be mindful of as well. Mentioned in the article economy, there are different ways to come in. So the author submits to the journal brand with a high impact factor for how the user actually accesses the research via a myriad of different things such as citations, abstracted and indexing, keywords, titles, and discovery services. I'm going to move quickly through structured abstract and keywords because I'm very mindful of time, but if anyone would like to discuss these kind of things afterwards, I say it's more to do with how you prepare your paper for publication, and these slides will be shared and made available. I can refer to them in the Q&A. What I would recommend, though, again, is another free link. It's called Why Academics Choose Useless Titles from Professor Patrick Bunlevy at the London School of Economics. It's a blog in which he says, without embedded cues, your work will sit undisturbed on scholars and PDF libraries, or languish unread among hundreds of millions of other documents on the World Wide Web. I say in the article economy, it's so vitally important that you choose good keywords, good abstracts, good titles for your work. It's no longer enough, I think, to assume that once you're published, it will be read. Once you're published, that's the beginning of how you get your research access. This is an example from the University of Melbourne, published in the European Journal of Marketing last year. A very simple title, no esoteric keyword, kind of, instead of, they said celebrity, they could have said high socio-economic wealth and influential person, they just said celebrity. They know they're from Australia, so when they write their abstract, they use the same keywords throughout, plug it into the bottom, refer to the fact they're from Australia. You think that can't possibly be scholarly, it's so readable and accessible. They still have highly quality research because it's published in an ISI-ranked journal. We found that paper was downloaded nearly 5 times as much as other papers published in the same issue, released at the same time, that have gone through the same processes. So again, it's just to refer to the, once you're published, that's the beginning of things. So when you submit your paper, the title is important, the abstracts, the keywords, everything you submit with your paper is going to influence and affect the end result once you are published. And then one of my professors in philosophy, when I was undertaking my master's degree, said that the best way to get cited is to be fantastically wrong. So citations are a very important indicator of quality. But something could be cited hundreds of times just because everybody could not wait to say how wrong that research was. We've also actually several times investigated the correlation between citations and downloads, and to this day we can't actually find any significant correlation. So even when we make papers freely available, or even when we conduct certain marketing trials, a paper could be cited hundreds of times and downloaded 20, downloaded thousands of times and not cited very often. Sometimes it matches, sometimes it doesn't. This depends on discipline trends, whether the article is viewed as seminal, whether it's a review article. Wiley Blackwell, 5 years ago, undertook a study of open access journals as well. So you think a journal which is open access should have the highest citations and the highest impact. Again, they didn't necessarily find that result. Just quickly, I mentioned that publishing industry is an incredibly technological industry. I'm proud to say that in 2014, Emerald actually went live with a world-class platform called Miseratum, provided by Atacom in California. This has given us genuinely world-class metadata functionality to ensure that when your paper is published, and it's the metadata is sent to companies such as Google, it's the cleanest kind of high-profile metadata we can possibly put out. Last year, Emerald was also actually invited to become a trial member of the Kudos Project. And what Kudos aims to do, it's a free service which we offer to all of our authors. And it aggregates your social impact. So your tweets, your Facebook likes, your shares, even your institutional repositories, your things like Mendeley. And Thomson Reuters has actually joined this trial as well. So now also your citations and your impact factor implications can be aggregated into a dashboard, which again your library can help with in helping you manage and keep track of your own individual impact as a researcher. There's just a quote there from Tony Roche. Again, going back to that original point of just continuing to add value to the community. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. I hope I struck a good balance between kind of strategy and tactics, but I'd just like to say they're more than happy to take queries afterwards. And obviously, my colleague Stanley is in Hong Kong every quarter. I hope to come back again next year, perhaps. But more than happy to take queries. Please do get in touch.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. So as Mark said, he's ready to take some questions. So the floor is open.
Hi there.
Well, it was about, we talked about the rejection rate, acceptance rate / rejection rate, whatever you like to look at it. As a manager of a journal, is there a strategy to control, like, is it your target? Or I'm thinking, how, like, as an editor, like he received, or the reviewer, how do they judge, okay, how good is to accept? Like, is there a limiting factor as well? Because it is a very good article, but we cannot accept it because we have to reach that.
Yes.
I was just curious.
It's a very good question because I think rejection rates are often misused, not intentionally. People using the shortcuts to quality indicators. You know what I mean when I refer to as KPIs, so key performance indicators. I have hundreds of KPIs from them, I think I need to complete. I view rejection rates as well as just a KPI of a journal. So you don't achieve your KPIs by holding them in front of you and trying to meet that KPI and match it year on year. It's something that runs alongside what you do. So we always say to our editors, good editorial standards, solid peer review process, and good service to authors, and we'll keep track of these KPIs as they run alongside. So if the KPI drops from a very high number to a very low number, that's then a prompt for the manager of the journal to go investigate why that's happened. Maybe the editor's not struggling to deal with the amount of work which has come in. So maybe we need to recruit another editor to work alongside them for additional support. So I'd say when you see rejection rates of like 90, 95%, or maybe 40, 30%, they're not entirely comparable because it's the amount of papers which a journal receives. The trends within a topic, whether it's a special issue just after a conference, all those kind of things will happen. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. So, well, I just want to have a sense how rigid or how high a priority, you see that number. And for example, does Admiral has a benchmark, say, how when that number hit a certain level, then it trigger your attention to check with the editors and reviewers, etc.
Yeah, so if the number's really low, it's a trigger, but it's a trigger to a conversation with the editor. So it's never kind of like a knee-jerk reaction. So we need to reject more things. That's not going to get the result that's required. It's just something like KPI that sits alongside organically the journal. So that's why it can often be frustrating from a publisher's point of view when it's just, like I said, my rejection is 95%. I was like, well, I know, but that's not. It's not what we're trying to do with the journal. That's an indicator of success or not.
Thanks.
Okay. Other questions?
Mark, I think I do have to give compliment to Emerald. I guess Emerald has done very good service to the author. Sometimes I do receive email from Emerald saying, okay, you have published this article, but there are ways for you to increase the impact by doing this or that, I cannot remember whether that's one email that asked me to do Kudos, the one that you just mentioned, that they said you can claim your article and then maybe give a better non-technical description of the abstract, so that to increase the readership of the article, something like that.
Yes.
And then recently, I also discovered, Emerald, when you submit articles, they also ask for your ORCID ID. So if you don't have one, create one, or if you have one, put down your ORCID ID as well, so that they can lump all the articles within your ORCID ID into your own profile. So I think these are very good service that the publisher has done to the author. Yeah. So, but there are so much things going on in publishing. It is hard for the author to keep track of all the trends and all the new things happening in the field, right? Any suggestions for the authors?
I will tell you a blog which every publisher at every publishing company reads. It's not a secret because it's a blog, but it's really amazing. I'm sure actually some of the library faculty will know more about this blog than anything. It's called The Scholarly Kitchen. You just Google The Scholarly Kitchen. That is publishers basically writing blogs to each other about trends and developments which they have seen, things which they have participated in, discussions around things such as funding, research impact, the influence of citations. There's always lots of blogs when the new impact factors come out and people talk about highs and lows and who's kind of moved around. So actually, if you just subscribe, they have Twitter accounts as well. So it's something you can keep track of. Like I say, everybody in publishing reads that blog. Every publishing company. I'm glad to hear that. Kudos, you like that service. That yes, the head of the publishing division, my boss, is on the advisory board of Kudos as well. So it's not just something we're taking part in, kind of, and just sitting back and see what happens. We're constantly feeding back to the trial team, telling them ways they can improve things they can amend and make better.
Okay, thank you. More questions?
Hiya.
Wait,
RBC questions. Do you have any tips for young researchers when they're publishing? Like, it seems to me that the rejection rate is pretty high.
It's a good question. Like I say, it can often seem like a very opaque and kind of secretive process, and it's really not. So if you've kind of developed a publishing strategy and you've identified a few journals which you would like to one day get published in, I would just reach out, maybe not directly to the editors-in-chief initially, but the editorial advisory board, the editorial review board. I'm sure for several Emerald journals, I'm afraid we don't have the data to hand, but we have advisory board members at UST for several of our journals. Professor Xu is a good example. So I just have that conversation with somebody. Where do I start? Is for example, a publication out there. A good place to start is often special issues. So you'll see a call for papers announced by the journals. We're going to have a special issue dedicated to this topic. And if that matches your specific research interest, that's your chance to get straight to the front of the queue and to say, I have a paper ready for this issue. Even if you submit to that special issue and it goes through peer review and it ultimately doesn't get published, you've still learned something very valuable from that process. So when it next comes around, you can try again. And I'd also develop several types of publications, so I wouldn't pin all your hopes on just this one stellar research paper that you've got. I'd have a variety of publications under progress. So maybe you may develop some shorter papers, what we call short form communications, around 5,000 words, up to the full research article of about 8, 9, 10, 11, 12,000 words. Some journals often publish book reviews. So a book review just in like a summary of what the book is about. Obviously it's a synthesis and it relates it back to the literature. So often that's a very good way of kind of honing your writing skills. Book reviews still undergo the peer review process. It's just more editorial review rather than the full double-blind peer review. So everything that you can do, well, it's kind of like a rolling stone. That's kind of it. The more it rolls, the more moss it gathers. So it's the other way around it. But you can develop those publication strategies, and as I say, just looking at journals, whether you have faculty journals that maybe aren't even published by a publisher. I don't know whether you have any here, but lots of journals have faculty or departmental or university journals. I often see a lot of journals as well which are established by PhD students. So I'm in discussions with Columbia University at the moment. They have a Journal of Comparative Education based at Teachers College, and it's actually been run by PhD students for many, many years. So that not only helps raise the profile of the PhD programs at Columbia University, it also gives the students kind of an inroad and a way of gaining those peer review processes. So I say it's very simple behind the scenes process of peer review. So I don't know, maybe that's an idea if you wanted to establish one with your staff or faculty, whether they'd like to help you be on the advisory board. You can set up a quick blog. So it's still publishing, you still put the research out there. You gain lots of experience and you kind of feel how it works for yourself. Does that give you some ideas? It's very difficult often to give just general advice. So if you'd like to follow up, and if you just let me know your discipline, in kind of journals which are identified. I'm more than happy to spend some time chatting about that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we still have a little bit more time.
My question is related to the publication assets. Because I serve as editor of a journal published by elsewhere, and also associate editor of another journal also published by elsewhere. So we frequently encounter some, say, double submission case. Recently, I use iSyndicate, cross-check software, to screen every paper.
Yes.
But still, I encounter some problems. Recently, I encountered 2 cases. In one case, the author submitted 2 papers to another journal. After 2 or 3 weeks, he submitted the same journal to my journal. So because iSyndicate cannot compare the submissions, they only compare with published articles. So this kind of situation cannot be found until a reviewer pointed he reviewed the same paper with 2 journals. Another case is one paper was almost rejected, a very serious criticism from one journal. And the author, during the process, he didn't submit a revised version to that journal. Instead, he submitted to my journal. And fortunately, I know the editor-chief of that journal, so we communicate and found out the situation. So in both cases, we cannot use the syndicates to find out the cases. So I'm just wondering, as a publisher, do you have any suggestion or any technical tool to provide the editor and the reviewer a powerful tool so that we can find these cases early to avoid wasting of time and avoid the precedent and so forth?
I think you've just given me the best possible example of why you shouldn't do this. Look how angry he gets. And just to keep in mind that reviewers and editors they all talk, they communicate, and if it's highly unethical because of how much time you're wasting of professors and researchers and editors-in-chief. It's a very good point that Authenticate only deals with the scholarly published version of record. So it deals more with plagiarism. So it deals more with if a paper has been published 3 years ago and someone's lifted entire sections and published in their paper. When that paper is submitted, it goes through Authenticate, we get a report instantly that tells us exactly which journal that paper has been lifted from. So sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's unintentional. So we don't always just go straight back to say, you plagiarized, reject. But say we use the publication ethics guidelines. So we just say, can you explain this? And then we allow the author to make a case as to what happened. There have been unfortunate times when it was intentional and we've had to go to the university and then it becomes a university matter rather than a publishing matter. I'm afraid there's no kind of quick win as to prevent an author submitting to more than one journal at the same time, other than to emphasize this case. The research field may be huge, but the editorial kind of network is relatively small. So you have to be really established to be the editor of a journal. So you're very well connected with other editors of the journals and other reviewers, and people talk and people collaborate. We actually had an example with an Elsevier Journal Policy Journal, where a paper had come in, and the reviewer had reviewed for it and realised that they were also being invited to review the paper for an Elsevier Journal as well. So not only did the editors talk, the publishers talk. So we got in touch with the publishing team there and said, okay, can you send me the date? When did they submit it to you? When did they submit it to us? Which editorial team had the submission first? Because that submission should take precedence as in line with the Committee on Publication Ethics guidelines. So it is a commercial industry, but these are businesses, but it's also a very communal, kind of collegiate atmosphere. Publishers talk, editors talk, we all talk to each other. So you can put yourself in a very bad light if you do this more than once. I appreciate actually that some people do it completely unintentionally. They do not know that that's not an acceptable thing to do. Because as you say, with Authenticate only checks the published scholarly record. So you may think that until I get to that point, it's fine to do this. But it's really not.
So there's no plans to make a sort of pre-publication authenticate at this point? I mean, or if we go to start blogging on the Scholarly Kitchen, set up a movement for it?
There's no quick win unless there is just one publisher in the world. Which I don't think is going to happen that very soon.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that wonderful real-life sad story. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Well, just a quick follow-up question. Do you blacklist repeated offenders?
That was a really tough question.
Can you identify them with double-blind review?
It's a strange one because you think that people should be blacklisted if they do the same repeats over and over and over again. Actually, under European law and English law, that counts as a restriction of trade, because the authors are not paid for the submission of their manuscript, and because Emerald doesn't employ any editor, we work on an honorary basis. If an author was blacklisted, we actually restrict that agent's ability to trade and to disseminate their research. So what we can do is kind of make it known that someone has done something that's not advisable. It spreads actually quite naturally amongst the community. So you actually don't see it all that often because people are aware of the impact within their own research community that can have. And obviously, because it's so vitally important and it's so dependent upon relationships and connections with colleagues across the globe, you don't really see it happen all that much. I think people get their fingers burnt once, and then you quickly don't do that again.
Okay, thank you.
Just one last question. Actually, it's out of your topic today. You talk about publishing journal articles, but I also noticed Emerald have a lot of book and book series as well. Now these days, people are also talking about when they have a book chapter published, it might be a good idea to have a DOI for each book chapter in order to increase its visibility and make it easily citable, things like that. Is that some plan that Emerald is planning to do?
Yes, so every single one of our book series and volumes have DOIs. So the DOI is the Digital Object Identifier. So online and in the article economy, it's vitally important that every piece of research can be traced to this unique DOI. So all of our book series use DOIs.
Up to the chapter level?
Onto the chapter level. So I mentioned with the reason why we've invested so heavily in the Atipon platform is to ensure that things like DOIs on the chapter level, the article level, the volume level, the journal, the paper, no matter what, if it's published, it has a DOI. Because it's so important. So that's something that Emerald does kind of behind the scenes. The academic community may be not obviously aware of it. You just see this 14, 15-digit number along the bottom of your paper, and that's like an individual barcode for that item. So yeah, all of our books have DOIs. It's because our books have DOIs, they're actually acceptable for Web of Science and Scopus. So some of our book series are actually included in ISI, which you don't often see for many publishers. It's mainly just journals, but we have journals and books. So we appreciate that for actually some disciplines, you're more likely to publish within a book series than a journal. So in my own field of educational research, lots of researchers, teacher training materials are published within a book because it allows for longer expositions of 15, 16, 17,000 words rather than a shorter journal article. So if the journals and the books are set up to receive the research, and it's at the article level that's most important, the article or the chapter level, which is important for the researcher. So yeah, everything is compatible.
Okay, well thank you, and I think we should all say thank you very much to Mark and Professor Xu for having given us this wonderful talk and information. And everyone have a lovely afternoon.
Enjoy the view.